Hello, hello, and welcome back to week two of Black Girl Magic Book Chat Women's History Month edition. I am Larissa, the AARC coordinator, and all month long I am regaling you with stories by and about Black and African American women as a way to share and honor their stories for Women's History Month. So I started week one off last week with the incredible debut novel by Chimamanda Adichie, Purple Hibiscus. This week, I have another debut novel by Nicole Cuffy. It's called Dances. This time I read a physical book. It's called Dances. And it is about a young woman who becomes the first Black principal dancer at the New York City Ballet. Well, like a fictionalized version of the New York City Ballet. One of my favorite things about doing these book chats is the focus on different stories. So when I'm choosing books, I try to highlight stories that are different from my own. I try to find stories that are set in different and various locales about women who have different jobs than me, about women who experience different home lives or family situations. It's a learning opportunity. I always say that I'm a lifelong learner, right? Like if you go on my LinkedIn, on my Facebook, that's kind of that, those little blurbs that you can tell about yourself. I always say I'm a lifelong learner. I am always interested in learning about people. Part of it is because I'm a little bit nosy. But I love learning about people. I love learning about the way people grow up, the things that they do, the choices that they make, how they influence life and their stories. And so I think that's one of my favorite things about doing these book chats is getting to choose books, one, that I wouldn't always normally read, but two, getting to kind of learn about other folks and the way in which we have things in common or things different. And so I love that. So this book and last week's book were definitely looks into lives that were different from mine. So in Dances, also just like a cute little cover, right? I love it. In Dances, we follow Cece Cordell. Cece is a ballerina. She's in her early 20s when we get to the events of the book, at the start of the book. She's working as a ballerina dancer with the New York City Ballet. And soon into the book, like 50 or some pages in, she's promoted to principal dancer. And she's the first Black principal dancer in this company. And obviously, it's a huge deal, right? As the book progresses, we get flashbacks of her childhood and her dance journey to her current position. And so we kind of learn about her through those flashbacks. Things have not always been easy for Cece. She grew up in Brooklyn with a largely absent father and a mother who didn't quite understand her love of dance, and so showed very little interest and very little support in that part of her life. And for many dancers, that's their entire life. When I was in one of my best friends from high school, we're still very good, we're still friends, but she was like, when we were in high school, that was my homie. She was a dancer, and I would go to some of her competitions, and so much of her life revolved around dance. And so for women and men, people who are dancers, that takes up a lot of their free time. Um, and so when your mother doesn't show interest in this thing that takes up all of your time, you end up feeling some type of way, right? Her saving grace, though, is, especially when she's a young girl, is her brother, Paul, and he encourages her love of dance because he's also an artist himself. He's a visual artist. He paints and whatnot. And so he understands that need and that love of performance and artistry. In fact, especially when she's young, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, he is the one who is scraping together the money to pay for her classes. And he often is the one who takes her to these classes, guides her on the subway, walks her there, and all of that kind of stuff. Because her mom pretty much refuses to. But her brother has his own demons. And when she's a teenager, sorry, when she is a teenager, he simply disappears from her life. So Cece's promotion to principal dancer sort of opens up all these thoughts and feelings and ideas about her life. She sort of, and I don't even know if she does it on purpose, but this promotion becomes a sort of gateway to reflection about how she's gotten here and what she hopes to gain from being here. And she starts to wonder, does she truly trust her boyfriend, who is another dancer in their company? Her friendship with her best friend seemingly begins to deteriorate because of maybe differing interests. Her relationship with her mother is still not strong after all these years. And Cece wonders if her mother has been waiting, not necessarily wishing, but waiting for her to fail. And Paul becomes a heavier thought, and personal circumstances that could ruin her career sort of requires her to take a break from dancing. And in that break, she attempts to find the one person who has always been in her corner. Cece's relationships with her family, I think, really showcase how those relationships influence our lives. Our families are our first touch point, right? Like, they are the people who we first learn how to, they're who we learn from, right? Your mom or your dad, your grandparents, your cousins, your siblings, however your family life is when you are a child, they are sort of the people who teach you about interaction, right? And so, as someone who's very close to my mom is so supportive of everything that I do, quite honestly. It was kind of hard to read about this relationship where her mother was largely unsupportive. And I do think that it speaks to the reality of many people's relationships with their parents, including young women and their mothers. Those are not always easy relationships. And I don't think it's that her mother didn't love her or that she didn't think that she was talented or any of that. It's, I think, because she loves her and knows that this world is not always kind to Black women, that she's harder on her. She wants her to find a real job because the world of dance is a fickle world, right? But regardless of the why and the how and the way that, her mom likely feels justified in the why, the reality is that it makes for a strained relationship. I feel like I use the word relationship a lot. I'm going to use it some more. And so, we see this very strained relationship that Cece has with her mom. And like I said, regardless of why it's strained, it's there, and that causes harm. Like, that causes hurt. I also like the exploration of Cece's relationship with her brother. I'm not extremely close to my brothers. I've got several. But when I was younger, there was one that we were real tight. But it spoke to me in the way that regardless of time and space and circumstance, that love that you feel for your siblings, especially one who was so much a part of your formative years, that doesn't go away. And so I could understand the worry and the wonder that she had about her brother. And I will say that part with her brother did not end exactly how I wanted it to end, but I remain hopeful that things worked out the way that I wanted them to work out. What I did like about this book is that the discrimination in that ballet space is subtle. Nicole Cuffy doesn't create these over-the-top scenarios that are meant to show how horrible the underbelly of dancing is or whatever. I think a lot of times in books that do speak to spaces of a Black girl being the only one in them, or something similar where there's discrimination and there's racism and that's obvious, I think that it's easy to create these sort of in your face sort of scenarios so people get it, to hammer it in. And even outside of just like that racial piece, I also think that in a lot of books where, or even in films about women and dance or women and cheer, or, where there's like a group of women and they're like fighting for this top spot, we often see sort of like that sabotagey type things where you have like women putting, I don't know, hair remover in the shampoo. Just like these like very kind of in your face, like I said, those in your face sort of moments. We don't necessarily get that here. And I think I appreciate that because discrimination is always not this sort of in your face thing. It's subtle a lot of times, which why it's sometimes so hard to explain that feeling. Um, so what Nicole Cuffy does here is she shows it's about the always comparison that Cece is getting to the other dances. A lot of times about stuff that she can't control, like the way her hair right fizzes up when she sweats, or the way that her hips and her behind stick out more than some of the other girls because of the way that many black women's bodies are shaped as compared to a lot of white women, especially dancers, right? Like, you know, that ballerina look, she didn't necessarily have it in the way that people liked it. So we see how that becomes nitpicky with teachers and other folks in the company. It's about that always constant lack of comfortability, where she's like always the only black woman in a room. And that's not always a good feeling. Even if you're in a space that you feel comfortable in, being the only person who looks like you, that's gonna always cause a little stress. It's also in being made to feel like she just didn't belong, point blank. Um, there were women who would do that, even though they weren't loud about it. It was there, and you know that ballet has a certain look, ballet has a certain feel, and so often black people and other persons of color are told that the way that they look does not fit into that ballet, that dancer sort of vibe. Um, yeah, they tell them that it's not theirs to claim almost, and that therefore ballet is not a space for them to be included in. And I think Nicole Cuffy does a wonderful job of showing that. She also writes with such lyricism. It was frankly lovely writing. I'm not a dancer, and so she used a lot of terms I didn't know, a lot of dancing terms. A lot of times when Cece is practicing, she kind of will go through the movements that she's doing. But even if you don't know it, you can see it, right? If you've ever been to a ballet or some sort of dance competition, it's a beautiful, beautiful art form. And so, I kind of make up what the moves are in my head. But I just think that Nicole did such a beautiful job of immersing us into Cece's world, because she looks and she thinks and she lives dance. And so I think that was very important for us to see. I was reading this article that Nicole Cuffy, this interview, and she talked about, because she is a dancer, and she wrote this book because there was no book for her. And so you do know, like, as you're reading, you can tell that this book is for black dancers, black women dancers. But I loved it. It was a lovely, lovely book, I thought. So that was dances. Next week, I am reading Crystal Wilkinson's Birds of Opulence. It's set in the South, which I do love. Kentucky, not Georgia, but they have their similarities. And it's about a family in a black township and some of their more mysterious ways, we'll say. I can't wait to share that with you all too. So until next week, I'll see y'all.